The CEO of the ICC now, that is a former Ambani employee. The Ambanis obviously own Mumbai Indians, they own the Oval team, the New York team.
Cricket's governance structure, has it gotten better or has it gotten worse?
It's probably gotten worse.
Instead of International Cricket Council, they call it Indian Cricket Council. Would you subscribe to that?
Look, there are a lot of decisions that are now made directly because of India. We do not know where the money goes for most cricket boards in the world.
Jarrod Kimber is a journalist and a documentary filmmaker. 10 years ago, he produced a documentary for Netflix called Death of a Gentleman. In the documentary, he exposed how cricket was being taken over by corporate and political groups. Today, he's joining me from London, and I'll talk to him about how in the last 10 years, ICC has evolved and if he can see any parallels between what's happening at FIFA and what happened at ICC when the big three came up. Thank you, Jarrod, for doing this. I want to start by asking you, that FIFA episode where FIFA tried to privatize the World Cup and different organizations, especially UEFA, standing up to FIFA. It drew some parallels with what happened in the cricket arena like 10 years ago when this whole debate of Big Three was coming up. And you did a fantastic documentary on that. It's called Death of a Gentleman. It's on Netflix. So I want to ask you, do you see any parallels between what's happening at FIFA right now and what happened in cricket?
I follow a lot of American sports as well. And it's happening in American sports, it's happening in football, it's happening in cricket, which is that billionaires are basically worked out how much money sports is worth, right? And after years of probably not really understanding that and maybe not investing in the way that they should have, they are. And so what I saw with FIFA is probably them realizing that in some ways they were falling behind. Right. And so they wanted to cash in on these billionaires. I don't know if you saw the story about the LA Lakers, but the LA Lakers sold for, I think it was 10 billion 14 months ago, and they've just sold for 12.5 billion. Right. The rates of which these sports rights are going up. And I think FIFA wanted to be involved in that. And if you go back and you have a look at the people who were involved directly with the Big Three takeover of cricket, it's two entrepreneurs. It was N. Srinivasan and Giles Clarke. Were they financially involved? Yeah, a little bit through Chennai Super Kings. Not so much on Giles Clarke's point, but Srinivasan was a little bit involved there. But that's a big difference from the people who used to run cricket, right? The people who used to run cricket were administrators and care holders and old men in jackets, right? Who liked wearing the ties. And all of sport is now moving towards hedge funds and private equity and, conglomerates. And, I talked to one person who owned a bunch of franchise leagues around cricket. And he said to me, I don't own them because I love sport. I own them because they're really good media projects going ahead, right? That's the way that people are talking about sport now. And it's very different than probably even 5 years ago, but certainly than 20 or 30 years ago.
So I can give a very recent example of Jeff Bezos and, Amit Bhatia coming together, Eduardo Severin as well, coming together, and they've bought a minority stake at Liverpool. And you would ask them, what business does Jeff Bezos has with Liverpool Football Club or English football? And one can answer that, that it's a very attractive proposition. A lot of American businessmen are coming to football in the UK. But coming back to cricket, so your documentary is 10 years old now. So since then, do you see that the cricket's governance structure, has it gotten better or has it gotten worse?
It's probably gotten worse, I think. There was, at the point we made the movie, so the movie was watched by the Supreme Court of India, and, they didn't just look at us, they talked to a lot of people, and they realized that some changes to the governance of Indian cricket needed to happen, needed to be modified as much as anything and modernized. But that needed to happen at that stage. And what then happens is, for a little while, you kind of have almost a separation of the BCCI and the ICC. Obviously, the ICC is always going to be looking at what the BCCI is doing, but they weren't completely joined at that point, which probably helped cricket for a couple of years at least. Look to what the global game needed. Since then, Jay Shah has obviously been involved with the ICC. How many decisions he makes, I'm not sure. He seems to mostly just use the ICC social media department to make videos about himself, from what we can all tell. But he's certainly much more powerful. He's directly linked to the BCCI and to the BJP party, to the ruling party of India, in a way that wasn't happening when we made the film. Now, having said that,
No,
when we
but
were
back
making
then, I think Srinivasan, he was also connected to BCCI
That's
and
what I
he
was
was
about-
connected to ICC.
That's what I was going to say. So when we were making the film, what you had was something slightly different. What you had was someone who owned an IPL franchise who was also running the ICC. And those two things are completely different to each other. And you still had Srinivasan involved, as you said, with the BCCI and the ICC. So is it better? No. Is it different? Yes.
Is it good different or bad different?
I think N. Srinivasan is one of the smartest people I've ever dealt with in my professional career. A very intelligent man who is completely on top of the ball and would micromanage every small detail. Jay Shah is not like that, right? I don't know how intelligent he is. I haven't spent very much time with him, but he's clearly someone who's much more interested in his own image and, holding trophies and handing over trophies and these sorts of things than he is in micromanaging cricket. So perhaps that will allow for people who actually know what they're doing to make more decisions that are good for the game. Overall, I would say if you look at the CEO of the ICC now, that is a former Ambani employee. The Ambanis obviously own Mumbai Indians. They own the Oval team, the New York team. Go through all your favorite franchises in the world. Chances are that they own a franchise in one of those leagues. So I would say that in some ways it's worse and in some ways it's better. But it's not as if suddenly cricket has got a good global governance. It still has the same terrible global governance it had when we were making the film. It's just different.
Yeah. So many experts, they use this term. Instead of International Cricket Council, they call it Indian Cricket Council. Would you subscribe to that?
No, it's way more complicated than that. It really is. I think that's one of those things that it's an easy thing to say, but there are so many things that are still done that are at the board level and that everyone else. As I said, it was probably more like that 10 years ago when we were making the film than it is now in some ways. But the problem is, I don't know, what companies you've worked for before, but I've worked for companies that are owned by very rich and powerful organizations or people, right? And the people in those organizations, it's not as if I work for TalkSport. Rupert Murdoch doesn't ring us up at TalkSport and tell us what we can and we can't talk about. But the people who work for Rupert Murdoch at TalkSport are very aware that Rupert Murdoch has certain views, right? A lot of the decisions that are made incorrectly at the ICC are made before it gets to anyone with an Indian viewpoint. Right? They're already pre-changing the decisions. And I've seen this pattern a lot in major businesses before. So there is an element of that. Look, there are a lot of decisions that are now made directly because of India, but that's actually not that much different than like America and the Olympics, right? You look at America, I remember as an Australian, when there was one year when the swimming times for the Olympics should have been in prime time. And you can imagine in Australia, we do very well in the Olympics. We wanted to watch it in prime time, but they were switched to the morning because that was prime time for America, right? And Australians went wild. The biggest market wins, right? That is how these things go. And so sometimes this isn't a case of the Indian Cricket Committee, as you just put it. It's someone at the ICC going, well, we could make more money now, so we want to make more money. That it's as simple as that. So it's not even that India is running the game in all these situations, because as I said, I don't think they're as organized as they should be if that's what they actually want to do. But it is that people are making decisions based on the Indian market way more than they ever have in the history of cricket.
In your documentary, there was this one cement company that you mentioned that had more influence on ICC and BCCI than anybody else. Can you talk to us about that episode, about that company, and is it still the case?
Yeah, I mean, so that was Mr. Srinivasan's company. And as you would know, this happens in Pakistan as well, that quite often rich industrialists or billionaires will own, not only will they own a business, but they will own cricketers. And in that case, he had contracts with MS Dhoni and Rahul Dravid, who are incredibly important players, and they were vice presidents. If you know anything about business, you know that they give the term vice president to kind of anyone at any stage. But they were people that were involved in that. And so you have a situation where they are paid by a franchise. They are then paid by the BCCI, and they're also paid by the guy who works for or runs the BCCI and then eventually the ICC. The conflict of interest level there is absolutely staggering, right? And this is an issue right across all professional cricket. We are probably of all the sports I've ever sort of looked into, I'm not sure if cricket, if any sport has a high level of conflict of interest than cricket does. To the point at which when you point it out to people, like I commentate with people who are agents for the people they're commentating on, and they don't see it as a big deal. In other sports, this would never be allowed, right? And in cricket, they get upset when you mention it because it happens so often. There are so many conflicts that people just kind of throw their hands up about it. And Srinivasan's concrete company, India Cements, and all these there's so many other companies that do these sorts of things. No one even looks into them. The level of corruption within cricket that isn't even like, I don't mean evil corruption, I just mean business ethics corruption, right, is so high that no one's even looked into it. And I remember talking to two different Supreme Courts when they were looking into their boards, and they said, Jarrod, if we start to look at all this stuff, it will take us 10 years to unravel the business ethics issues that are happening here. And I was like, yes, that's how intertwined it is.
One important takeaway from your documentary was how secretive ICC has been. I remember you visited one of their meetings and you were stopped from attending that meeting or even entering that hotel. Is it still the case, or has ICC gotten more transparent since then?
I think they've got slightly more understanding that people would cover it. Look, when we turned up, I don't think it wasn't even that they wanted to throw us out of the place. They were more shocked that we knew it was happening and that we knew where it was happening, because people hadn't turned up to these events before, right? And you're talking about, these are billion-dollar decisions being made in rooms where there's no journalists that they have to speak to afterwards. And so I think now there is a lot more, some of this is leaks. There are a lot more leaks that come out of those meetings because journalists know when these meetings are happening now at a rate that wasn't happening 10 or 15 years ago. And separate to that, there is now more of a global coverage of cricket. You've got to remember that cricket comes out of a newspaper series, right? And so generally you only wanted to cover your cricket or how cricket, how a decision would reflect your country. That's not really how the internet works, right? And so the ICC have had to move with that. But there was a case a couple of years ago that I thought was hilarious, where the ICC, I think, had 3 media managers. One was doing an under-19 tournament. One was away on personal reasons. And I think the other one was sick. And so there wasn't anyone actually working at one stage. And 3 media managers for a multi-billion-dollar sport where New Zealand at that stage, which is a tiny little cricket organization, had 4. And I think that tells you that, yes.
Even Pakistan Cricket Board has more media managers than that.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like, it's ridiculous. And so, yes, they're trying to do it, but they also try to make sure, remember, it's the boards running the ICC, essentially. They try to make sure that the ICC can't really do good PR for themselves. So a lot of the bad PR that comes from the ICC comes from the fact that they don't actually have enough staff dealing with the fact that they are a huge organization.
Jarrod, one thing, I was talking to a journalist for our research in terms of finding out what the formula or the distribution formula for the revenues is. And I was told by one of the journalists that it is very difficult for you to get hold of an official document on that. Is that the case?
Yeah, I mean, right across cricket. So every now and again, you will see a database that will come up, or a graph that will come up that will tell you how rich each cricket board is, right? Have a look at them. There's about 4 of them. They're all different to each other. And the reason is we don't know how rich each cricket board is because each cricket board doesn't tell us. And they're the same people that run the ICC. So they don't want that information getting out there. And I don't see, as far as I'm concerned, the ICC, BCCI, PCB, Cricket Australia, I don't care who you are, you only exist because of cricket fans, right? That's the only reason they exist. No one's ever said, well, Cricket Australia or the BCCI, these are brilliantly run organizations. They're clearly not, right? They're clearly not very well run organizations. And so the fans deserve to know the information, and they don't. And so it comes all the way down to, as you said, the exact revenue splits and everything else. Sometimes these things get leaked and we have the information, but there is no official database. And again, this comes back to ethics, right? If you don't make these things open and honest, how do we know that people are doing these things correctly? And the answer is we don't. We do not know where the money goes for most cricket boards in the world. And how is that acceptable as cricket fans when we're the ones who give them that money?
I was following trajectory of a Pakistani cricketer all his life. In his early career, he trained for the 3-day cricket or the 4-day cricket. But for him to get featured into the Pakistani team, he had to make sure that he performs well in PSL or the shorter format, the 20 overs cricket. So all his training was for him being a 3-day player. But now he has to transform himself into somebody who can hit those no-look shots and those sixes and all that. That would essentially mean, and that was the crux of the documentary as well, that the classic format, that is the test cricket, all of the development in cricket is at the expense of test cricket. And 10 years since then, where do you see the test cricket these days? Does it still have that charm? Do you think that cricket or test cricket, it is still a commercially viable thing for the administrators?
It definitely is. I mean, I think test cricket is a perfect sport for modern world. It's a streaming sport. You have to come back day after day.
In terms of finances, in terms of revenue.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I would say, and I'm being friendly here, I would say at best, we are monetizing 30% of test cricket's potential at the moment. And I'm being friendly there. It's probably we're monetizing 15 to 20% of it. The way that test cricket is run is so poor that we are not making the money off it that we need to. Now, the issue is, I would say that the last 3 years have been the most entertaining in test cricket. We just had Bangladesh beat Australia, right? Like, what an incredible moment that is. We had New Zealand go to India. We've had so many great upsets and, come from behind games, and test cricket's really exciting at the moment.